was a quiet night in California when the camera lights turned off at the BuzzFeed studio. 4 years, two men, Ryan Bergera and Shane Maddich, had explored the darkest mysteries in their show. BuzzFeed Unsolved. They talked about ghosts, murder cases, and strange disappearances. But what they didn't know then was that some of the cases they once called unsolved would soon have shocking answers. This is one of those stories, a real mystery that haunted thousands of people online. A story of fear, obsession, and finally, truth. Back in 2017, the BuzzFeed Unsolved team covered the mysterious death of Elisa Lam, a young woman who vanished inside Los Angeles Cecil Hotel. It became one of the most watched videos in BuzzFeed Unsolved history. Elisa was a 21-year-old student from Canada. She came to LA for a short vacation. She was bright, full of dreams, and loved to share her life on Tumblr. But in February 2013, she disappeared. 2 weeks later, hotel guests began complaining about the water pressure. Some said the water from their taps looked dark. When workers checked the rooftop water tank, they made a horrifying discovery. Elisa's body was floating inside. No one could understand how she got there. The rooftop was locked, alarmed, and not easily accessible. Then came the famous elevator video. Security footage that showed Eliza behaving strangely, pressing multiple buttons, hiding in corners, waving her hands as if someone invisible was there. The internet went wild. People created thousands of theories. Some said she was possessed. Others believed someone was following her. BuzzFeed Unsolved explored every angle, but ended with the same chilling truth. Nobody knew for sure what had happened. Years, new videos, podcasts, and Reddit threads kept the mystery alive. It became an online ghost story. Everyone wanted to solve it, but behind the screens, detectives were still working. They studied the old footage again and again. They rechecked the hotel's security and interviewed old staff. And then one clue changed everything. Investigators found out Eliza had been struggling with bipolar disorder. Her medicine was found in her room, but some doses were missing. The autopsy showed no signs of struggle or injury. Slowly, the pieces started to connect. Detectives realized Elisa might have stopped taking her medication properly, causing her to experience hallucinations. In that confused state, she could have entered the water tank herself. A tragic accident, not a murder. It was not the ending people wanted. It wasn't the ghost story that got millions of views, but it was the truth. BuzzFeed Unsolved had once left the case open, but now it was finally solved. Elisa's story reminded everyone that sometimes the real explanation is not supernatural. It's painfully human. But Elisa's case wasn't the only mystery BuzzFeed Unsolved touched that later found closure. In 2018, Ryan and Shane covered the strange case of the Golden State Killer, a man who terrorized California in the 1970s and 1980s. He broke into homes, attacked couples, and left behind a trail of fear. The police had evidence, DNA samples, and dozens of victims. But for 40 years, the killer's name remained unknown. BuzzFeed Unsolved presented the story with all the details. The crimes, the patterns, the fear. The host ended that episode saying, "Maybe one day, we'll finally know who he was." And that one day came just a few months later. In 2018, using a new DNA tool called genetic genealogy, police matched DNA from old evidence to a family tree uploaded on a public genealogy website. It led them straight to Joseph James Dangelot, a 72-year-old former police officer living quietly in a suburban neighborhood. He was arrested in his driveway, shocked, silent, and surrounded by memories of his crimes. The man who had escaped justice for decades was finally caught. When BuzzFeed fans heard the news, they went crazy online. The episode that once said unsolved had suddenly become solved. Ryan and Shane's voices echoed in everyone's minds, but now the story had a real ending, one no one expected. These moments showed something powerful. Sometimes, mysteries do end, but when they do, the truth feels heavier than fiction. BuzzFeed Unsolved started as entertainment, but it became something more. It gave attention to forgotten victims. It made people curious about justice, and it kept cold cases alive long enough for answers to finally come out. Behind every unsolved case, there was a real person, and behind every video, there were fans hoping for peace. Elisa Lam's story ended in sadness, but truth The Golden State Killer's story ended in justice, and there were more other cases Ryan and Shane had covered that would later find answers too. Each one proved that no mystery stays cold forever. But one case, one BuzzFeed Unsolved story, came back in the most shocking way possible. A mystery no one expected to be solved. A single piece of evidence, found years later, would turn a ghost story into a real murder confession. What was that case? And who was the person behind the truth? You'll find out in Part 2. It had been years since BuzzFeed Unsolved first covered the story of the mysterious Watcher house in New Jersey. A quiet-looking home with a dark secret. Ryan and Shane had called it one of the creepiest modern mysteries of all time. At the time, there were no suspects, no arrests, and no answers. But what no one knew was that one day, this strange story would finally be solved, and the truth would be more disturbing than anyone expected. In 2014, Derek and Maria Broaddus bought their dream home, a large, beautiful house in Westfield, New Jersey. It was perfect for their family, but just days after they bought it, they received the first letter. The envelope had no return address. Inside, typed in neat handwriting, were the words, "Dear new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood." At first, the couple thought it was a harmless message, but as they read more, their hearts froze. The writer claimed to be watching the house. The letter said, "I see that you have children. Have they found what's in the walls yet? I've been watching 657 Boulevard for decades. My grandfather watched it in the 1920s, my father in the 1960s. Now it's my turn." The couple was terrified. They had not even moved in yet, and already it felt like someone was stalking them. They contacted the police. The officers read the letter and agreed it was disturbing. But there was no clear suspect, no fingerprints, no camera footage, nothing. Weeks passed, and another letter arrived. Then another, each more personal and creepy than the last. The writer mentioned their kids by nickname. He described what the family was doing inside the house. It was clear someone nearby was watching them. BuzzFeed Unsolved covered the story in 2019. Ryan and Shane walked through every theory. A jealous neighbor, a local prankster, even the real estate agents. Some people even believed it was all a hoax. But like many mysteries on the show, the episode ended with one big question mark. Nobody knew who the Watcher really was. But in 2023, nearly 10 years later, a cold clue came back to life. Police had kept every letter safe in storage. When DNA testing technology improved, investigators decided to test the envelopes again. This time using advanced genetic tracing. It was a long shot, but what they found changed everything. The saliva on one of the envelopes didn't match any criminal record, but it did match someone who had uploaded their DNA to a public ancestry website. It led detectives to a woman living only a few streets away from the Watcher house. She was in her 60s, quiet, and had lived in the neighborhood her whole life. When questioned, she denied everything, but her son, a middle-aged man with a history of mental illness and obsession with the Broaddus family, became the main suspect. Neighbors had always found him strange. He used to stand outside the Watcher house late at night, sometimes whispering to himself. One even remembered seeing him walking near the mailbox on the very days the letters were delivered. Police searched his home. Inside, they found hundreds of old photos of houses in the neighborhood, including several of 657 Boulevard. There were also typewritten notes with similar words and phrases to the Watcher's letters. When confronted, the man broke down. In a trembling voice, he confessed that he wrote the letters. He said he never planned to hurt anyone. He just wanted to keep the spirit of the house alive. He claimed that his mother and grandmother had told him stories about the Watcher, a ghost who protected the neighborhood. Somewhere along the way, fantasy turned into obsession. The truth was out. The Watcher wasn't supernatural. He wasn't a ghost or a secret society member. He was a lonely man who believed he was protecting a house that didn't belong to him. When the news broke, fans of BuzzFeed Unsolved couldn't believe it. The case that once ended a mystery had finally been solved by modern DNA science. Almost like the Golden State Killer. For Ryan and Shane, It was another strange reminder that the world of Unsolved never stays still forever. The story of the Watcher became a symbol of how real-life horror can hide behind normal walls. It wasn't about ghosts or demons. It was about human minds that twist stories into nightmares. Even after the confession, some people refused to believe it. Some said the man was too convenient a suspect, that he might have taken the blame to protect someone else. Others thought the truth was deeper, darker, and still hidden somewhere in that old neighborhood. But the police closed the case, and for the Broaddus family, it was finally the end of a long nightmare. For years, BuzzFeed Unsolved had covered cases that left the audience uneasy, mysteries that didn't have answers. But now, more and more of those stories were being solved. The world was changing. Technology was catching up. DNA, online databases, and digital footprints were turning mysteries into truths. Ryan and Shane, the faces of BuzzFeed Unsolved, had often joked about ghosts and conspiracies, but they always said one thing that stuck with people. Sometimes the scariest thing, isn't what is dead, it is what is alive. And they were right. Elisa Lamzeth, the Golden State Killer, the Watcher. None were supernatural. They were proof that humans, not monsters, create the darkest stories. Still, the internet loved to believe in mystery. People missed the thrill of the unknown, the feeling of wondering what could be hiding in the shadows. Even when a case was solved, fans kept the memory alive, because every mystery starts with one simple question. What if, as night falls and the lights go out, someone out there is still watching BuzzFeed Unsolved reruns, maybe even near the real Watcher house. Maybe standing across the street, looking at that same window, whispering to themselves like the man once did. Because even when a mystery ends, the curiosity never dies. Years after BuzzFeed Unsolved ended, many fans still returned to watch the old episodes. Each one had its own mystery. A missing person, a strange death, or a killer who vanished into thin air. But time has a strange way of answering questions. One by one, the unsolved cases started to reveal their secrets. The most famous of all was the Zodiac Killer, the mysterious murderer who terrorized Northern California in the late 1960s. He sent letters and ciphers to newspapers, bragging about his crimes and teasing police with clues. He called himself Zodiac, a name that became one of the most feared in American history. BuzzFeed Unsolved had covered the Zodiac case years earlier. Ryan and Shane walked through every theory. A school teacher, a journalist, even a random stranger who fit the sketches. The case was full of twists, but like always, it ended with the same frustrating words. Still unsolved. But in 2021, things changed. A group of retired detectives, code experts, and forensic analysts, known as the Case Breakers, announced that they had finally identified the Zodiac Killer, using old photos, handwriting samples, and DNA traces from one of the letters. They named a man called Gary Francis Post. Post had died in 2018, but during his life, he had lived in California, near many of the Zodiac crime scenes. The evidence wasn't perfect, and the police didn't officially confirm it, but some of the clues fit too perfectly to ignore. His old acquaintances said that Post used to brag about killing animals and painting with blood. When this news broke, the BuzzFeed Unsolved fans went wild. The comments under the old Zodiac episode were flooded with excitement. People wrote things like, "Ryan and Shane, you need to see this," and the case might finally be solved. Even though it wasn't a full police confirmation, it was the closest answer the world had ever gotten. The story that once felt endless now had a name, a face, and a chilling silence from the grave. But the Zodiac wasn't the only old case that got cracked. Another case from the BuzzFeed Unsolved archives, the murder of the Lady of the Dunes, finally revealed its secret after almost 50 years. Back in 1974, a woman's body was found in the dunes of Provincetown, Sadnoit. Her hands were missing, and her face was unrecognizable. For decades, nobody knew who she was or who killed her. BuzzFeed Unsolved had featured her case as one of the creepiest unsolved murders in American history. Ryan and Shane had even mentioned a wild theory that the woman might have appeared in the background of the movie Jaws, which was filmed around the same time. It was a strange, haunting mystery until 2022, when DNA genealogy finally identified her. Her name was Ruth Marie Terry. She was 37 years old, from Tennessee. The man who killed her own husband, Guy Rockwell Moldavin, a traveling antiques dealer who had a dark history of lying and violence. He had murdered her shortly after their wedding and disappeared. For years, he moved from place to place, pretending to be someone else. When he died in 2002, he took his secret to the grave, but DNA brought it back to light. The truth was heartbreaking, but for the first time in decades, Ruth had her name back. She wasn't the lady of the dunes anymore. She was a real person with a story and a life. BuzzFeed fans felt emotional when the case was solved. It wasn't just another mystery checked off the list. It was proof that these stories mattered, that talking about them, keeping them alive, helped bring justice, even after death. And as more cases found answers, the idea behind BuzzFeed Unsolved began to feel even more powerful. What started as an internet show for entertainment had become something deeper, a voice for forgotten stories. Ryan and Shane always ended their episodes with humor, laughter, or a bit of fear. But behind the jokes, there was always empathy and respect for the victims. They reminded viewers that every unsolved story was someone's real tragedy. One night, years after the show had ended, Ryan posted a message on social media. He wrote, "It is strange to think that so many of the cases we once covered now have endings. But maybe that is the best kind of closure, to see that truth never really disappears." Shane replied under it, joking as always, "Guess we'll have to change the name to BuzzFeed Solved." The comment went viral, but it made fans realize something important. Time never stops investigating. Technology, new witnesses, DNA, and human determination can reopen any case, even after decades. Every story that BuzzFeed Unsolved once left hanging in mystery now carried a sense of hope. From Elisa Lam's tragedy to the Golden State Killer, from the Watcher's creepy letters to the Zodiac ciphers, each story reminded people that no crime stays hidden forever. The world had changed since BuzzFeed Unsolved began, but the fascination with mystery, that feeling of wondering what is hiding in the dark, would never fade. The show may have ended, but its spirit lived on in every true crime channel, every late-night theory video, every viewer still whispering, "What if?" Even now, as the internet moves on to new mysteries, people still return to those old videos, hearing Ryan's serious tone and Shane's calm sarcasm. They laugh, they get scared, and they remember that those stories were once real lives. The solved cases gave peace, but they also left one haunting question. If so many mysteries can finally be solved, how many more are still waiting in the shadows? Because somewhere out there, in an old box of evidence or an unread file, lies another story, waiting for someone to ask the right question, to notice the right clue, or to care enough to keep it alive. And maybe, just maybe, the next case that BuzzFeed Unsolved, once called a mystery, will soon have its truth revealed too. The lights fade, the screen darkens, and the echo of old BuzzFeed Unsolved clips plays softly. Ryan's curious voice, Shane's laughter, and that haunting theme music. For millions of people, these sounds are not just entertainment. They are memories. Memories of mysteries that once seemed impossible to solve. Years later, as the world moved on, something strange happened. The stories that once lived only in YouTube videos began coming back to life in police reports, in DNA labs, in confession rooms. One by one, the unsolved became solved. But even with answers, the story still felt unfinished. Because truth doesn't erase mystery, it just changes its shape. Ryan Burgerae often said that he started BuzzFeed Unsolved because he loved the unknown. He wanted to understand why people do dark things, what drives obsession, what makes the human mind so unpredictable. But as time passed, he realized something deeper. That the unknown isn't just about ghosts or killers. It's about people, the pain they hide, the choices they make, and the consequences that follow. For years, Ryan and Shane walked through haunted hotels, crime scenes, and dark alleys, searching for signs of life after death or truth after silence. What they didn't realize was that they were helping the world look closer, think harder, and care more about those forgotten names in history. Elisa Lam's case, once wrapped in horror and superstition, turned out to be a story of mental health and human tragedy. The Golden State Killer, once a faceless monster, was unmasked as an old man who had lived among ordinary people. The Watcher, once believed to be a ghostly figure, was just a broken mind lost in obsession. The Lady of the Dunes, Onsa, nameless, finally got her identity back. Each story peeled away a layer of myth to reveal something more human and somehow more frightening. The truth was never supernatural. It was real, raw, and close. It reminded everyone that evil doesn't come from spirits. It comes from people, and that realization changed how viewers saw the show. BuzzFeed Unsolved became more than just late-night entertainment. It became a symbol of curiosity, proof that no mystery is ever truly dead. Somewhere, someone is always looking for the missing piece, and sometimes that's all it takes to bring the truth to light. Fans often said the show taught them two things: to believe in logic and to never stop questioning. Even the jokes between Ryan and Shane carried a strange honesty. But humor can live next to horror, and curiosity can live next to fear. When the final season of BuzzFeed Unsolved aired, Ryan ended it with a quiet line that still gives chills to those who hear it. Maybe some stories aren't meant to be solved. Maybe they're meant to be remembered. But now, with so many of those stories finally solved, that line feels different. It feels complete, because remembering is what kept these cases alive. Every viewer who watched, every theory shared online, every discussion on forums, all of it helped. It created noise around silence, light around darkness. The internet can be wild and chaotic, but sometimes it becomes the world's biggest detective team. And that's what made BuzzFeed Unsolved timeless. It wasn't about two hosts chasing ghosts. It was about two friends exploring the edges of fear and showing the world that answers can exist even in the strangest corners. The show ended, but its energy never died. New creators started their own mystery channels, inspired by Italiano. Police departments began re-examining cold cases, encouraged by the public's renewed interest. Even families of victims found comfort knowing people still cared. The truth spread in waves, like ripples in a dark lake. The reflection of Ryan and Shane's stories kept moving through time, touching new cases, new questions, and new people. Sometimes, in interviews, Ryan still talks about those days, the long nights of research, the abandoned places, the laughter that followed fear. He says the thing that surprised him most wasn't the ghosts or the killers. It was how much people cared. We just told the stories, he says. The audience gave them life. And Shane, as usual, adds a joke, calling it the most haunted homework ever. But even in his laughter, there's respect, because both of them know what the show really did. It made people believe in truth again. Now, when fans revisit old episodes, they see them differently. They watch the Zodiac episode and whisper, "We know now." They watch the Eliza Lamb case and say, "She found peace." They see the Watcher's story and think, "He was caught." The word unsolved feels like a reminder, not of failure, but of progress. Because every time someone cares, every time a story is told, the mystery gets a little smaller. And yet, even as more answers appear, there will always be one question left. How many more truths are still waiting? Somewhere, right now, another mystery is beginning. Another name, another secret, another case waiting to be told. Maybe the next BuzzFeed Unsolved doesn't exist yet. Maybe it's someone out there watching, wondering, ready to ask questions the world forgot to ask. The camera fades to black. The music slows, and Ryan's voice echoes one last time. Remember, every mystery starts with curiosity, and curiosity never dies. The screen turns dark. A single text appears. Some cases are no longer unsolved, but the search for truth never ends. And just like that, the story that began with two men and a camera ends with millions of people still watching, still wondering, still believing that one day, every shadow will have a name.